Have you ever really thought about how much of your life was already decided before you even took your first breath? Well, it turns out that the first 1,000 days, from the moment of conception to about your second birthday, is this absolutely critical window that shapes your health, your brain, and your future in ways we're only just starting to fully grasp. And it all comes down to this incredible idea called fetal programming. So, fetal programming, what is it? Think of it like this. The womb isn't just a waiting room, It's the very first classroom. The environment a fetus is in, especially the hormonal signals it gets from its mother, acts kind of like a software developer writing the first lines of code for its entire life. And that initial programming, it can have consequences that last a lifetime. Okay, so to really get this, we've got to start small, at the micro level. We're talking about the biological blueprint we're all given. This is basically the starting hand of cards we're dealt for the rest of our lives. And the crazy part is, it's dealt before we're even born. Now, we've all heard it a million times. Stress during pregnancy is bad. Full stop. But what if I told you it's, well, a little more complicated than that? Is a mother's stress and the hormones that come with it always a bad thing for the baby? Let's actually look at the science, because the answer might surprise you. This right here is what scientists call the cortisol paradox. So cortisol, that's our main stress hormone, and it kind of has a double life. On the one hand, way too much of it for too long can be toxic to a developing brain, no question. But on the other hand, a natural spike in cortisol late in pregnancy is actually essential. It helps mature the baby's organs, and it can even boost brain development. It really all boils down to timing and dose. And here's the proof of that positive side in action. Studies have found that a normal rise in a mother's cortisol during the third trimester is linked to some amazing outcomes for the child years down the road. We're talking a thicker cortex in the brain's frontal regions, which is huge for decision-making, plus better cognitive performance and even a bigger vocabulary. It's just a perfect example of how finely tuned this whole process is. But listen, hormones are only one piece of the puzzle. Two other factors are absolutely massive predictors of long-term health: how much a baby weighs when it's born, and when it decides to show up. These two things, they tell us so much. Take a look at this number. Just let it sink in for a second. 10.6. What could that possibly be? Well, this is the increased odds of a child being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder if they were born either very preterm or with a very low birth weight. It's a staggering figure. And here's the bigger picture. It's not just autism. One huge study found that being born very early or very small dramatically increases the odds for a whole range of psychiatric disorders compared to kids born at term. We're talking over 5 times the odds for ADHD and almost double for anxiety. So the takeaway here is that our biological starting hand has a long, long reach into our lives. But of course, biology doesn't happen in a bubble, right? The world we are actually born into, our culture, our community, the kind of care our mothers get, all of that profoundly shapes how that biological blueprint actually plays out. So let's zoom out a bit and look at that context. Okay, for our first case study, we're going to rural Zambia. And what we see here is this powerful clash between really deeply held traditions and the advice of modern medicine. Researchers have a term for what mothers here go through. They call it maternal dualism. Just imagine being pulled in two completely opposite directions. On one side, you've got generations of cultural wisdom about how to protect your newborn. On the other, you have the modern healthcare system with a totally different set of rules. And the mothers are caught right in the middle of that tug of war. And we're not talking about vague suggestions here. These traditions are super specific. Things like rituals using fire to make a baby strong, putting traditional herbs on the umbilical cord, or the fact that it's often the grandmothers and husbands, not the mother, who make the key health decisions. This isn't just folklore. These are real practices that directly affect a baby's health. Okay, now let's jump halfway across the globe to Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's a very different setting, but it reveals a surprisingly similar challenge. Here, we're looking at the experiences of young, pregnant Maori women. There's this really harmful stereotype that these young women are lazy or just don't seek maternity care early enough. But the research, it shows the complete opposite. They are actively trying to get care, and early. The problem isn't them, it's the system. They get handed a list of names and numbers and are just left to figure out a confusing, fragmented system all on their own. And this is the bottom line. The delays in getting care are a system failure, not an engagement failure. So these two places, Zambia and New Zealand, couldn't be more different, right? But they bring us to our third big idea, the larger systems that surround families. And they show us, crystal clear, how these systems can either build pathways to good health or throw up massive roadblocks. So what's the common thread? Well, in New Zealand, you've got a system with plenty of resources, but it's so broken up that it creates delays. In Zambia, you have a system with fewer resources that clashes with local culture, and that creates deterrence. So two different problems, but they lead to the exact same outcome. Vulnerable mothers get left behind.
Okay, so if those are the problems, what are the solutions? I mean, how do we actually start to bridge these gaps? Well, the good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The World Health Organization actually has a really clear framework for this. And the solution isn't just build more clinics. It's smarter than that. First, community mobilization. That means actually going into communities and working with them to figure out problems and solutions. Second, partnership. Working with traditional healers and midwives, not against them. And third, empowerment. Giving women the tools and the knowledge they need to navigate these confusing systems themselves. And that brings us right back to where we started. Because the consequences of getting all of this right or getting it wrong, they don't just last for a few months or a few years. Our beginning creates an echo that lasts a lifetime. Let's be really clear. When we talk about those higher risks for babies born too early or too small, we are not talking about a temporary hurdle they just get over in childhood. The evidence is overwhelming that these are often lifelong challenges that need support and understanding well into adulthood. This chart just drives that point home. These are lasting vulnerabilities that you can trace all the way back to the day someone was born. That biological blueprint sets a path. And understanding that really shows why the right support systems are so critical, not just for kids, but for their entire lives. And, it's even bigger than specific diagnoses. These early biological factors also shape something much broader, a child's overall well-being, what researchers call their health-related quality of life. Get this, research has shown that for every 100-gram increase in birth weight, that's less than a quarter of a pound, there's a 3% drop in the odds of having an impaired quality of life later on. That's incredible. It shows you just how sensitive our development is to these very first conditions. Even the smallest variations really, really matter. So we're left with this. From the hormones in the womb, to the culture mother is part of, to the healthcare system that's supposed to support her, the foundation of a human life is set incredibly early. Which leaves us all with a pretty big question to think about. What is our shared responsibility to make sure the first 1,000 days of every single life are as healthy and as supported as they can possibly be?